When I was 10 years old, I stood barefoot in the driveway, soaked to the bone, my backpack sagging from the rain as I watched my mom's red minivan disappear around the corner. I still remember the sound of the tires splashing through the puddles and the way my breath fogged in the cold air. "Figure it out yourself," she'd snapped, rolling up the window before driving off. I didn't know what I had done wrong. Maybe I'd forgotten to bring something home from school, maybe I'd talked back, or maybe she'd just had a bad day. But that night, I curled up on our front porch with nothing but my soggy hoodie as a blanket, pretending it was all some big misunderstanding. I was too young to realize it wasn't. My name's Drew. I'm 25 now. I live in a high-rise condo downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows and heated floors, things I used to think only existed in movies. I've built a quiet, comfortable life, one where no one raises their voice or slams a door, and no one tells you you're the problem every time they lose their temper. People always talk about how they wouldn't be where they are today without their parents' support. I wouldn't be where I am today because of my mother. Not in spite of her. Because of her. Back then, I didn't understand what was happening. I just knew I wasn't like the other kids at school. When my classmates' parents picked them up, they got hugs and snacks. I got silence, or worse, sighs of annoyance. My mom, Jenna, was what you'd call appearance-focused. She wanted everything to look good from the outside. We had nice clothes, a decent house. She always made sure our front yard was trimmed and neat. But inside that house, it was cold. Not just in temperature, but in spirit. She didn't believe in babying me. That was her phrase. "Life's tough, Drew. Better learn it early." She'd say it when I came home crying because I got pushed around at school. "Don't let them see you cry." She'd say it when I got sick and asked for soup. "Your legs work, don't they?" And she said it that night in the rain. "Figure it out yourself." Then she drove off like it was no big deal. That was the first time I ever really felt invisible. Not just ignored, but like I didn't matter at all. I was a kid who had to parent himself, who learned not to ask for help because the answer was always no. I stopped telling her when I needed things. I found a way to get them myself. I started skipping lunch at school and saving the money she gave me so I could buy extra notebooks, pencils, even socks. I'd clean my own clothes in the bathtub when she forgot to do laundry. At some point, it stopped hurting. It just became normal. My dad, gone before I could say the word. She told me he wasn't cut out for responsibility, whatever that meant. I used to imagine he was some kind of secret millionaire who'd one day come back and rescue me. The truth, when I finally learned it, was less cinematic. He was just a scared kid who married the wrong woman and ran the first chance he got. No letters. No birthday cards. Just vanished. By the time I was a teenager, I'd stopped hoping for anything from either of them. Jenna started dating a man named Keith when I was 13. He moved in after just a few months, and from day one, it was clear that I wasn't part of the picture. Keith was a wannabe tough guy, one of those men who thought sarcasm and bullying made him alpha. He'd laugh when I walked into the room. "Look at this little princess," he'd say if I wore anything that didn't scream tough. Once, I wore a hoodie with a book quote on it, and he said, "That's why you ain't got any real friends, Drew. You'd rather read about life than live it." Jenna didn't stop him. Sometimes she'd even smile. I think she liked having someone else put me down. Made her feel less alone in the way she saw me. The day I turned 15, I came home from school to find my bedroom half empty. Keith had redecorated. Said I was too old for baby furniture and threw out half my stuff, including a box of notebooks I'd written stories in since I was 11. Jenna told me not to be dramatic. I remember standing in that doorway, staring at the empty space where my desk used to be, and feeling something harden in me. That was the day I stopped speaking unless I had to. I went quiet, focused. I started working at the local library after school. Saved every cent. College. I applied for scholarships in secret. Worked 2 part-time jobs during summers. I got into a great university 2 states away. I packed up my things in silence. And the morning I left, Jenna barely looked up from her coffee. "Don't flunk out," was all she said. I didn't. I graduated top of my class in computer science, got a job at a promising startup, and worked like my life depended on it, because for a long time, it had. After 4 years, I launched my own software company. 2 years after that, it got acquired. I became the youngest self-made millionaire from our state, according to one of those local puff pieces. I didn't talk about my family in interviews. Most of my employees didn't even know I had one, and I hadn't heard a word from Jenna in over a decade. Until 3 weeks ago, I was in the middle of a meeting when I got a notification, an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line was, "Long time, Drew." I clicked it out of curiosity more than anything. It was short, just one sentence. "Hey honey, since you're rich now, we need a place to stay. Keith lost his job. Can we move in with you for a while?" I stared at the message for a long time, unsure whether to laugh or feel sick. There was no apology, no warmth, just expectation, like nothing had ever happened, like we were just family. That night, I poured a glass of wine, sat by the window, and read the message again and again. All those memories came flooding back: the rain, the porch, the silence, the years of pretending I didn't matter. And now, she wanted in. She wanted comfort, shelter, warmth, the things she never gave me. I opened my laptop. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. And then, I started typing. I didn't reply to her right away. Instead, I just stared at the blinking cursor, feeling this strange mix of anger and disbelief crawling up my spine. After 15 years of silence, not a birthday text, not a single word during my graduation, not even a like on the public article announcing my company's acquisition, she came out of the woodwork asking for a place to stay. As if we were just long-lost pals catching up. As if the past didn't exist. But what really gnawed at me wasn't just her nerve. It was how casually she'd said "we," as in her and Keith. The same man who once held my college acceptance letter up in the air like it was some joke and said, "Bet this school lets anyone in if they took you." The same guy who used to unplug the Wi-Fi when I had online homework because he needed bandwidth for Call of Duty. And now they wanted to live under my roof. Still, I didn't answer. I waited. A few days later, I got another message, this time on Facebook. My mother had created a brand new account, complete with a profile picture of her and Keith smiling on a beach. The message read, "Hey sweetheart, just wondering if you saw my email. Keith and I are going through a rough patch right now. We'd really appreciate a little help from our successful son." The heart emoji was the cherry on top. She hadn't used that word, son, since I was a teenager, and even then, it was more of a legal designation than a term of endearment. What followed over the next week was a slow trickle of manipulation wrapped in faux affection. She began posting on social media pictures from my childhood, old photos of us at the park or me at school plays, with captions like "So proud of the man my little boy has become," and "Mama always knew you'd do great things." People I hadn't spoken to in years started commenting. Some even messaged me, "Wow, I saw your mom's post. She seems so proud of you. She told us about what you've done. That's amazing, man." I wanted to scream, because none of it was true. She wasn't proud. She didn't even know what I'd done. And suddenly, she was playing the role of loving, supportive mother to anyone who'd listen. I knew exactly what she was doing, crafting a narrative. One where I was the cold, ungrateful son who'd left his poor mother behind. The one who didn't return calls. The one who had changed. And I hated how easily people bought it. Then the real manipulation started. A call from my childhood neighbor, Mrs. Doyle, popped up on my phone one morning. I hadn't heard from her since high school. She was one of the few decent adults in that neighborhood, the kind who brought cookies over during holidays and slipped me a $10 bill just because. "Hi, Drew," she said softly, her voice still warm but cautious. "I hope you don't mind me calling, dear. Your mom stopped by. She told me you haven't been in touch and that she and Keith are in a bind." She seemed, well, honestly, she seemed really desperate. I closed my eyes, rubbed the bridge of my nose. "Did she tell you why we haven't spoken?" I asked. There was a pause. "She said you got swept up in success, that you've been distant." I didn't respond. I didn't have to. Mrs. Doyle was smart. After a beat, she sighed. "I don't know the full story, and I won't pry," she said gently. "But I wanted to let you know she's making the rounds. Telling people you've abandoned her, that you're refusing to help." There it was. She wasn't just trying to get into my house. She was laying the groundwork, turning the town against me, little by little, in case I said no. She was planning to guilt me into saying yes by creating a crowd of sympathetic voices around her. And I knew how this would go, because she'd done it before. Back when I was 16, I got into a summer program for kids interested in engineering. It wasn't fancy, just a couple weeks at the local university, tinkering with circuits and coding basic programs. I was thrilled, but there was a $400 participation fee. Jenna refused to pay it. "Who do you think we are? The Rockefellers?" she said. "Go mow some lawns." I did. I mowed every lawn I could find, saved up just enough, and submitted the payment the day before the deadline. A week later, I overheard her on the phone with a coworker, bragging about how she always encouraged my academic interests. Had to pay out of pocket for this summer thing, she said. But anything for my son. That was her game. Public generosity, private neglect. Now she was doing it again. Only this time, I wasn't 16. And she wasn't just lying for ego, she wanted in. The next blow came from an unexpected place. An old high school friend, Marcus, messaged me out of the blue. "Yo man," he wrote. "Weird question, but is your mom okay? She just added me and said she's been trying to reach you. Said you're too busy for family now." I wanted to throw my phone across the room. Instead, I calmly wrote back, "Do you remember sophomore year? When I missed 2 weeks of school? Yep. That's because Keith broke my wrist, and she didn't take me to the hospital until the second week. Said it was probably just a sprain." Silence. Then, "Holy crap. Exactly. But it wasn't over." The next week, she sent a handwritten letter, delivered to my office, on company letterhead, sealed with a heart sticker. The receptionist handed it to me like it was something important. I opened it slowly, half expecting a bomb to go off inside. It read, "Drew, I know things were hard back then, but people grow. I'm not perfect, and maybe I made some mistakes. But family forgives. That's what we do. Keith and I are losing the house, and we really need a place to stay. Just for a while. You have a big place. We won't be a bother. You're doing so well. I'm proud of you. Love, Mom. P.S. I already told Keith we could come next week, so let me know what time works for you." That last line made me freeze. She had already told him? Like it was settled? Like this was hers to decide? I stared at the letter for a long time. My hands were steady, but my chest was tight. Not because I was scared, but because I was angry in a way I hadn't been in years. A kind of slow, sharp anger that didn't explode. It just sat there, humming under the surface. I folded the letter neatly and put it back in the envelope. Then I opened my laptop, and I started making some calls. The calls I made weren't to lawyers or security, at least not yet. I reached out to a couple of people from back home, the few who still had some real connection to that world. My old guidance counselor, Mr. Langley, who once told me I had the quiet eyes of someone who survives everything. And Mrs. Doyle, again, who had always been more of a grandmother than Jenna ever was a mother. I didn't ask them for anything big. I just asked for honesty. "Has my mom told anyone else about this?" I asked Mr. Langley. He hesitated. "She came by the school, Drew. Said she was looking to volunteer or maybe speak to the students about how she raised a tech prodigy. Even dropped your name in the front office." My stomach turned. And that was just the start. By the end of that week, I got a message from my company's head of HR. "Hey Drew, not urgent, but your mom came up." Apparently, Jenna had sent a public message to our official LinkedIn page. In it, she praised the company I'd built, congratulated us on our record-breaking earnings, and, this was the kicker, offered to come speak at our Women in Leadership event about raising ambitious young men and building a household that values excellence. I read that line 3 times before my brain even registered the full weight of it. She was using me, not just privately, publicly, exploiting my name, my success, my company, for clout, for access, for some twisted version of redemption that she didn't earn. That night, I tried to sleep, but my thoughts kept running in circles. All the small betrayals piling up, like drops of water behind a dam. But I still hadn't heard from her directly since the letter. Then, just as I was getting up to make coffee at 3 a.m., my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Hey kid, Keith here. Your mom said you were thinking things over. I just want to say no hard feelings about the past. We all mess up. But you've got a killer place, and we're kind of counting on you to help out now that you've made it. We're family. Don't forget that. Oh, and I've got a few job interviews lined up near your area. So if you could clear out the guest room by Friday, that'd be awesome." I stood in the kitchen, staring at that message, my fingers numb. Clear out the guest room? That was the moment it snapped. They weren't asking anymore. They were assuming, planning, inviting themselves into my life like they still owned a piece of it. But the real betrayal came just 3 days later. I was in a meeting when my assistant knocked quietly and passed me an envelope. She looked uncomfortable. "Someone from your mother's church dropped this off," she whispered. I opened it. Inside was a printed flyer. On it, a photo of me, my face, pulled from some professional press release, smiling awkwardly in a button-up shirt, with the title, From humble beginnings to tech titan. The power of a mother's love, special guest speaker, Jenna Halbert. She was giving a talk at her church about raising me. She hadn't even told me. She didn't ask. I wasn't invited. She was using my story, rewriting it to make herself the hero. And then I noticed the bottom corner of the flyer. Donations welcome to help support Jenna and Keith during a difficult season. That was it. That was the moment I felt something crack. Not just anger anymore. Not just betrayal. Violation. She had turned my childhood into a campaign. Turned my survival into her struggle. Painted herself as a loving mother who'd sacrificed so much for her son's greatness. And now she was profiting off the pain she'd caused. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the dark, laptop open, scrolling through Facebook posts, church event listings, even an online blog entry where she'd written about being a single mother who never gave up. I don't know how long I stared at the screen, but at some point, I stopped feeling hurt. I stopped feeling shocked. All I felt was clarity. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about control. Jenna had always needed to own the narrative, control how people saw her, how they saw me. And now that I was out of reach, she was trying to seize it back. Smiling in public, lying in private, always justifying the past with a few flowery words and a carefully chosen photo. But this wasn't her story anymore. It was mine, and I was about to take it back, piece by piece. The very next morning, I received a voicemail from an unknown number. A woman's voice, kind, concerned. "Hi, Mr. Halbert. My name is Sharon. I'm the coordinator for the annual Mothers Who Inspire charity event. Your mother has been nominated this year, and we'd love to get a quote or brief statement from you about her influence in your life. We think it would mean the world to the attendees." I didn't delete the message. I just sat there and smiled, because at that point, I knew exactly what I had to do. I didn't respond to the event coordinator. I didn't call the church. I didn't post anything online. I stayed quiet, because that's what I had learned to do all those years ago on that porch, shivering in the rain with no one coming to let me in. Silence wasn't surrender. It was observation. It was preparation. And right now, I needed to see how far Jenna would go. But while I waited, something else crept in, something I hadn't expected. Doubt. Not doubt about the truth or what I had been through. No, that was burned into me like a scar. But doubt in myself. In whether all these years of independence had truly unshackled me from her. Because the deeper she dug into my public life, the more she tried to rewrite our story, the more I realized how little control I had over how the world saw it. I'd worked so hard to escape her, to become my own person, but now I felt like I was losing control again. My image, my name, my history, everything I'd built was being coated in a thin layer of her fiction, and it hurt more than I expected. Because for years, I thought I didn't care. I thought I'd buried it all, the resentment, the pain, the unmet need. But watching her stand behind a microphone and pretend she was the reason I'd made it, while people clapped and cried and dropped money into a donation basket, it reopened everything. I didn't tell anyone what was happening. Not my assistant. Not my closest friend, Simon, who I'd met in college and who once offered me a room in his apartment when I couldn't afford rent. Not even my therapist, who I'd quietly stopped seeing a few months earlier because I thought I was past all that. Instead, I pulled back, skipped a couple meetings, turned down a speaking engagement. For the first time since I started my company, I felt untethered. Not panicked, not dramatic, just disconnected. I spent a whole weekend sitting in my apartment, blinds half drawn, rereading that flyer and Jenna's social posts like they were evidence in some cold case. As if seeing it enough times would make it feel less surreal. Then came the photo. One afternoon, I was flipping through my phone when I saw that I'd been tagged on Facebook. It was a picture from the Mothers Who Inspire event. Jenna, standing at a podium, holding a bouquet of flowers, smiling like a saint. Behind her on the projector screen, a childhood photo of me, 5 years old, missing front tooth, standing in front of a birthday cake with her behind me, hands on my shoulders. The caption underneath read, "Behind every successful man is a mother who believed in him first." Thousands of likes, dozens of comments. "So beautiful, Jenna. You raised him right. Such a strong mother. Bless you." Tears in my eyes. What a journey. I dropped the phone on the floor and walked into the kitchen. I don't even remember what I did. Maybe I opened the fridge. Maybe I just stood there. All I know is my hands were trembling. It wasn't just the lie. It was how loved she was for it. How believable it all looked to anyone who didn't know better. For a moment, I even questioned myself. Was it really that bad? Maybe I was exaggerating. Maybe she did care in her own way. And then I remembered her voice in that car at age 10. Figure it out yourself. I remembered the bruises I had to explain away at school. The nights she locked her door while Keith stomped around the house drunk. The birthdays she forgot because she was busy with a new boyfriend. The graduation ceremony I looked out at, hoping she was in the crowd, only to find an empty seat. No, I wasn't exaggerating. This was the truth. My truth. And if I didn't do something, it would disappear under the avalanche of her fantasy. But I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I did something I hadn't done in years. I drove back home. Not for her. For me. It was a quiet 3-hour drive. The suburbs where I'd grown up hadn't changed much. Same cracked sidewalks, same overgrown bushes lining the street corners. I parked a block away from the old house because I didn't want to be seen. I walked past it slowly. The house was still there, same beige siding and sagging porch. But it looked smaller now, less intimidating. The fortress of my childhood had become just another worn-out home on a quiet street. I stood across from it for a while, watching the curtains shift slightly, like a ghost was moving behind them. Then I left. That night, I checked into a modest motel off the highway. I didn't need anything fancy. I just needed space to think. For hours, I sat with a pen and a legal pad and wrote everything down. Every incident, every memory I could summon. Not to dwell. Not for pity. For proof. I was going to fight back. Not with fists. Not with rage. With the truth. But not yet. I still needed to be quiet a little longer. Still needed to gather more. Because Jenna had been telling stories her whole life. It was time I told mine. The motel room was musty and the bed creaked every time I shifted my weight, but I hadn't felt that focused in years. Writing everything down, the rain, the porch, the broken wrist, the forgotten birthdays, was like stepping outside of my own skin and watching my life with clarity for the first time. It wasn't just journaling. It was inventory. Proof. A record of what really happened, unfiltered by her soft-smiling lies and curated stories. When the sun rose the next morning, I'd filled half a notebook. My hand ached, but my mind was sharp. The first thing I did was reach out to an old friend of mine from college, Rena. She had gone into investigative journalism, covering everything from corrupt school boards to shady nonprofits. Rena had always been curious about my past. Back in our sophomore year, she once asked why I never brought my parents up during breaks. I brushed it off back then. But now, I was ready to talk. I called her. No texts. I wanted to hear her voice. "Drew," she answered. "Wow, it's been forever." We caught up for a few minutes, and then I said, "I have a story. About my mom. I think it's something you'll want to hear." There was a pause. "Is this personal?" she asked. "It's more than that," I said. "It's also public now. She's using my name. My success. Telling the world she raised me with love and sacrifice. She's speaking at events, taking donations, giving interviews. And every bit of it is a lie." I could almost hear her leaning in. "Send me everything," she said. "Every memory. Every message. Every post." I did. I spent 3 days organizing it all. Photos, school records, screenshots, even a copy of the ER visit from when Keith broke my wrist. Rena was methodical, professional, but also quietly furious on my behalf. I could hear it in her messages. She didn't say it outright, but I could tell she wanted justice almost as much as I did. Meanwhile, my company was thriving. We'd just signed a major deal with a global logistics firm that would put us in front of a whole new client base. I walked into that boardroom the following Monday like a different person. I wasn't just the CEO. I was a man who had stood in the storm, been knocked down by it, and now walked with lightning in his bones. My team noticed. Simon, my CTO and closest friend, pulled me aside after the meeting. "You're different lately," he said. "Sharper. Focused." "I'm done being afraid of ghosts," I replied. That same week, I was invited to speak on a panel for young entrepreneurs. I almost declined. It felt too soon, but something inside me said yes. This time, I didn't avoid my story. I didn't pretend I came from some neutral, forgettable background. I didn't say my family supported me. I said, I come from neglect, from survival, from figuring it out on my own when no one else would. And if you're in that position right now, don't let anyone shame you into silence. The applause hit different. Afterward, a young woman came up to me, early 20s. Nervous energy. Thank you, she said, her voice trembling. No one ever says that out loud. That sometimes your family's the thing you have to overcome. I nodded quietly. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every kid who ever got left on a porch in the rain. Every child who grew up invisible. Every adult who had to build themselves from broken pieces. And suddenly, the power shifted. No longer was I hiding from Jenna's narrative. I was building my own. And mine had truth on its side. Rena messaged me later that night. I think I've got a draft, she said. It's not an expose. It's a profile. Honest. Raw. Your voice comes through. But I'll only publish it if you're ready. I read the draft 3 times in silence. It started with the line, Drew Halberd was 10 when his mother left him alone in the rain. I gave her the green light. Within 2 weeks, the article was live. From abandonment to tech CEO, the true story of Drew Halberd. It was published on a major online outlet and shared across tech forums, Twitter, LinkedIn, even Reddit. The piece didn't mention Jenna by name, but it didn't need to. The timeline, the events, the words, they all painted a clear picture. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of messages, some from strangers who had walked the same path, some from reporters asking for interviews, some from foundations wanting to partner on mentorship programs for at-risk youth. And then came the one that made me stop cold. A message from a man named Alan Pierce. I think I'm your father. He explained that he had read the article and recognized the names, the town, the timeline. He'd left when I was too young to remember, he said, and Jenna had never let him back in. He didn't expect anything, just wanted to say he was sorry, that he'd made mistakes, but he never stopped wondering. I didn't respond immediately. That door had been shut so long, I wasn't sure if it could open again. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had options, like I wasn't at the mercy of someone else's story. And while Jenna stayed quiet for the first few days after the article dropped, I knew it was only a matter of time before she reached out. She didn't disappoint. One evening, I came home to find a box on my doorstep. Inside was a scrapbook, labeled, Our Story. Photos of me as a baby, preschool drawings, report cards, clippings of my article, printed and highlighted. Sticky notes in her handwriting on almost every page. You used to love this toy. I cried when you won that award. See? I was always there. At the very back of the scrapbook was a folded letter. I didn't open it. Not yet. Because I knew exactly what it would say. She wasn't going to apologize. She was going to rewrite. To double down. And I had a feeling the worst was still coming. Because Jenna wasn't the type to go down quietly. And I wasn't the boy on the porch anymore. I didn't open the letter that night. I left it untouched on the kitchen counter, staring at me like a snake coiled inside paper. The scrapbook stayed too, spread open on the coffee table like a desperate monument to selective memory. But I already knew what it was, her version of the truth, rearranged into a glossy photo album. A tactical move. And that told me everything. She wasn't backing off. She was doubling down. Jenna hadn't contacted me to reconnect. She had contacted me to reclaim me. She saw my success as hers to manage, my story as hers to own. And now that I'd put the truth out there publicly, she was preparing to fight back, not with facts, but with perception. She was going to make this a war of narratives. But here's the thing. She wasn't the only one playing that game anymore. I had resources now, connections, and more importantly, I had the receipts. So I went to work, not on my company, not on my code, but on her story. I called Rena again. I told her I wanted to take things a step further. This isn't about hurting her, I said. It's about protecting what I've built. She's not just using my name. She's shaping my legacy with a lie. Rena didn't hesitate. Then we go deeper. But you'll need more than memories. That's when I started collecting. First, I filed a Freedom of Information Act request for every CPS report from my childhood zip code that mentioned our address. I didn't know if anything had ever officially been reported, but I remembered the day Mrs. Doyle gave me a box of cookies with a quiet whisper. You can come to my house if you ever feel scared, okay? Then I tracked down my old middle school principal, Mr. Burns. I wasn't even sure he was still around. Turns out, he was retired, living in Florida. He remembered me. Quiet kid, always polite. You once showed up with bruises. Told us you fell down the stairs. I didn't, I said. Keith pushed me. He sighed. I figured. But without proof. I'm not looking to prosecute, I told him. I'm looking to protect myself now. She's rewriting things publicly. I want to make sure the truth is preserved. He agreed to write a statement. Nothing official, just his recollections. He even had old staff notes. One of my teachers had logged concerns about neglect. All of it added weight to my story. But the most important piece came when I finally reached out to Alan, my supposed father. I didn't want to. Every part of me braced for disappointment. But his message had been quiet, humble, no demands, just guilt, curiosity, and maybe hope. We met at a diner 2 hours outside the city. Neutral ground. I didn't tell anyone where I was going. He was already there when I arrived, nervous, wearing a shirt that was too neatly ironed, like he'd spent the whole morning deciding what to wear. He stood when I walked in. Drew. Yeah. Hi. I didn't think you'd come. I'm not here for apologies, I said, sliding into the booth. I'm here for answers. And he gave them. He told me how he met Jenna, how charming she was at first, beautiful, intense, how she got pregnant fast and didn't tell him until she was already planning the nursery. I was 22, he said. I panicked. I didn't handle it well, but I wanted to be in your life. She made it impossible. Changed her number. Moved. He pulled out a manila folder. Inside were old letters, some addressed to me, some returned unopened. A couple looked like they'd been ripped open and taped shut again. I sent gifts, cards, every birthday. She never let them through. I flipped through the folder, my chest tightening. A card with a dinosaur on it, to my brave little explorer, postmarked 3 days before my 7th birthday. Never opened. She told everyone I abandoned you, he said. But I didn't. I wasn't perfect, but I never gave up. She just erased me. I believed him, because it was exactly what she'd done to me, too. She erased people when they stopped serving her narrative. And now she was trying to erase the truth again. Only this time, I wasn't a child. I left that diner with something more valuable than evidence. I left with clarity. Jenna was building a house of lies. I was collecting the matches. The next week, I got invited to speak at a national leadership summit. It was a big event. Thousands of attendees, live-streamed, panels filled with CEOs, authors, influencers. My team prepped a safe, standard keynote. Building resilience through innovation. But I threw it out. I stood on that stage, looked out into the crowd, and told them the truth. Not just the headline version, not just the public article recap. The whole truth. I told them what it means to build something without support. What it feels like to succeed not because of your family, but despite them. I spoke about the long-term weight of neglect and how the people who break you may one day try to take credit for your healing. And I ended with this. Legacy isn't about who raised you. It's about who claimed you and who tried to. So be careful who you let write your story. Sometimes the villain shows up holding a bouquet and smiling for the cameras. The standing ovation wasn't loud, it was long. The kind of applause that starts slow and builds like a wave. And when I walked off that stage, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Peace. Not because the storm had passed, but because I finally knew where I stood. Then, 2 nights later, I got a call from Mrs. Doyle. Her voice was shaking. Drew, she's going after your company. I froze, phone still pressed to my ear, staring out the window at the city below. Mrs. Doyle's voice, usually calm and comforting, was laced with urgency. She came by my house this evening, she said. Jenna said you'd been slandering her, that she might need to take legal action if you didn't stop. Legal action? Against me? She was waving some printed out pages. Mrs. Doyle continued. Screenshots. That article, your speech. Saying you made her look like an abuser. I thanked her, reassured her not to worry, and hung up. Then I sat in silence. This wasn't surprising. Jenna never took defeat quietly. Of course she'd spin the truth into a threat. Of course she'd try to flip the narrative, again, and position herself as the victim. But going after my company? That was a mistake. Because she thought she still had power. She didn't know that I'd already turned the tide. So I got to work. The next morning, I met with our in-house legal team. I laid everything out. The emails, the social posts, the flyers, the fabricated church speech, the letter she dropped off with the already told Keith we're moving in message, the scrapbook, the voicemail from Keith, and now, the veiled thread of legal action. She's making noise, I said. I want to make sure this doesn't reach our investors or clients with the wrong framing. Our head counsel, Kara, sharp as a blade, nodded. We'll prepare a public statement. But I suggest something quieter first, a cease and desist. Calm, factual, airtight. Not just to her, to anyone who's spreading falsehoods about your involvement or your company. That was step one. Step two was a call to Rena. I want to release the second part of the story, I told her. You sure? She asked. It gets personal. If we print what Alan shared. I'm not dragging this into the mud, I said. I'm just telling the truth. She's using my name to fundraise. She's rewriting history. If she wants to come at me with legal threats, fine, but we're putting her lies under a microscope first. So we wrote the follow-up together. It was titled, The Truth Behind the Mother-Son Fairy Tale, What My Success Cost Me. It wasn't angry. It wasn't emotional. It was evidence. Rena added scanned copies of unopened birthday cards from Alan, notes from my old teachers raising concern about bruises and emotional withdrawal, anonymous quotes from former neighbors who remembered the shouting, the cold silences, the way I walked with my head down. But the most damning piece? The church flyer. The one where she used my name and image without permission to promote a fundraising event. Our legal team added a note to the article. All names, likenesses, and materials used by third parties in reference to Mr. Halberd have been unauthorized and misleading. We advise readers to verify claims made in connection with his name. When the article went live, I didn't announce it. I didn't post it. I let the story do the work. And oh, did it work? Within days, whispers turned to questions. The charity page Jenna had used to collect donations quietly disappeared. The church removed the flyer from their website. Someone even found an old blog post of hers, long before my article, where she complained about raising a kid who didn't appreciate tough love. Public sympathy shifted fast. She hadn't just lost control of the narrative. She'd lost credibility. But I wasn't done yet. There was one final move to make. I sent Jenna a personal letter. Typed. One page. Jenna, you asked to move in. You told people we were close. You lied about raising me with love, and you tried to turn my name into your currency. You said I owed you. Here's the truth. I owe you nothing. What I built alone. The night you left me in the rain wasn't a one-time mistake. It was a pattern. And now that the world sees who you really are, I'm done responding to your drama. Consider this your formal notice. You are not welcome in my life. Not in my home. Not in my business. Not in my future. Sincerely, Drew. Enclosed with the letter was a copy of the cease and desist order. I didn't send it through email or post. I hired a process server to hand-deliver it, to her in public, at a cafe she frequented with her church friends. I wasn't there, but I heard from someone who was. Apparently, when the server called her name, she smiled and waved like a celebrity being recognized. When he handed her the envelope, she looked confused, then stunned, then furious. But there was no scene, because no one likes an idol with cracked paint. In the days that followed, Jenna went quiet. Her social media was scrubbed. No more posts about me. No more proud mom quotes. Just silence. Keith tried once to reach out. A long, rambling message about misunderstandings and let's talk like men. I blocked him. I didn't need to say anything else. Because the revenge wasn't loud. It was final. It wasn't about hurting her. It was about removing her from the story she never deserved to be in. A month passed. Then two. And the silence held. No more Facebook posts. No calls. No letters. The scrapbook disappeared from my doorstep one day. I assumed someone came to collect it, though I didn't ask who. Jenna faded from my periphery like a song I'd long since stopped listening to. Her name no longer echoed in meetings, interviews, or articles. My story was mine again. But Fallout has a way of finding its target, even without a headline. I heard bits and pieces from people back home. Mrs. Doyle, Rena, even an old neighbor who'd read the articles and reached out through my website. Jenna's church dropped her from their speaker list. Quietly, without fanfare. She still attended, but word had spread. People whispered. Donations dried up. The single mother narrative lost its shine when the receipts came out. Keith's job interviews? None of them panned out. Apparently, a few hiring managers stumbled across the articles. One even contacted my office to ask for a reference. I didn't say a word. I just forwarded the cease and desist. That was enough. Eventually, they lost the house. Foreclosure notice went up a few weeks after the second article dropped. Jenna tried to start a GoFundMe, this time without mentioning my name. It barely raised $100 before being reported and taken down. As for me, my company hit its next growth milestone. We opened a second office. I was offered a book deal, which I turned down. Not because I didn't have more to say, but because I'd already said what mattered. And the people who needed to hear it had. Alan and I stayed in touch, cautiously at first, neither of us trying to rewrite the past. Just two people, both shaped by silence, trying to build something new in its place. Sometimes we talk about work, sometimes about movies, sometimes about nothing at all. It's enough. And my life? It's quieter now. No drama, no manipulation, just peace. One evening, I found myself walking past the old house again. I was in town for a speaking event at a nearby university and couldn't help myself. The house looked even smaller than I remembered. The grass was overgrown. A for sale sign leaned at an awkward angle in the front yard, paint peeling on the porch steps. I stood there for a moment, not to reminisce, but to confirm something I had long suspected. There was nothing left there for me. No ghosts, no grip, just a shell. I turned around and walked away. And as I stepped back onto the sidewalk, a thought came to me, uninvited but powerful. Sometimes the best revenge isn't making them suffer. It's making them irrelevant. And I never looked back.